morning. We're all on the timer now, so I'm going to move fast before Jim Alexander gives me the hook. Good morning. On behalf of the membership committee, of which I am a chairman, I want to apologize to the last couple of people I think who might have walked in who didn't get a packet because we just ran out of packets, visitor packets. But I'd be happy to speak with you afterwards if you didn't get one. Anyway, my name is Linda Law, and I went to Unitarian Universalist Association General Assembly, which is the national conference where people come from all over the United States. There were people from Canada, and there may have been some from other countries that I somehow missed. But in any event, it was a big deal. And it was my first one. And we say GA, so that's what Martha was referring to, General Assembly. I want to begin my very short remarks with a quotation that I found actually online. I didn't hear it at the conference, but I loved it so much. It's by writer, artist, and teacher named Laura Czerwinski. She says, "Everybody is searching for sanctuary, a place of order and tranquility, a retreat from the disharmony of the world." And I believe that. And here's what I learned at General Assembly, that people are seeking sanctuary. They're seeking to restore recharge their batteries, find peace, tranquility, friendship, inspiration, and so on. This particular UUFC religious community and all UU communities are based not on a shared creed where you have to say what you believe and everybody agree on it whether they really believe it or not, but on a shared covenant, which is we agree to do the following things. We agree to treat people in the following ways. We want to be connected. We want to grow spiritually, to be encouraged to think for ourselves. And we support this movement, which is really larger than this fellowship. So I kind of had to coalesce a great deal that I learned at the GA experience. And since I'm membership chair, my focus is primarily on visitors. And I want to give you just a few notes from what I learned. Some of it we're already doing, some of it reinforced what I know. But in any event, folks, first impressions, you know, as they say, you never get a chance to make a second first impression. The first 7 minutes of your experience in a new place is critical. People entering our doors are in some state of transition. They've chosen to come here. They weren't dragged. Finding the building, very important. And we're always trying to find a way to put a sign or signs that comply with local regulations and let people know we're here. And Jim just gave me the 20-second mark, so I have to keep moving. Locating the correct door to enter. We're working on that. We're going to get signs that show you where to enter. Being greeted immediately and warmly. I do my best, and so does my team. The minister should join us at the front door, and Alex agreed. Yes, that's something that what we learned at GA. Having children acknowledged. If children are coming in, they need to be actively greeted, welcomed, and given what they need. We need to all be approaching visitors. This is not just committee work. And making sure people get their coffee or whatever they might need. We need to be friendly and warm, peaceful and quiet initially, not chaotic and frantic. We need a joyful vibe in our services. We need celebratory music of all kinds. Everything in here needs to have some element of inspiration. We need an inclusive tone. Visitors must not feel like they've dropped in on someone else's family reunion. Keep that in mind. Always use full names, including places. Do not say UU, say Unitarian Universalism. Do not say the mountain. The mountain is any piece of land that sticks up above the ground. Do not use acronyms or abbreviations such as RE, DRE, HULAs, UUA, SUSI, etc. That's very exclusionary language. So I don't want to end on a negative tone, but folks, we all need to remember this. Otherwise, people feel like they've crashed somebody's family reunion. Thank you. That's not my water. That's somebody else's water. I went over. 2 minutes.
Hi, I'm Lee Stevens. The meeting in Charlotte was my very first visit to General Assembly, and I was delighted by how wonderful the experience was. and how much I grew as a person and a Unitarian Universalist. I went in with the understanding that I would have to attend a long series of large-scale business meetings where finance and bylaws and other things beyond my level of involvement with the church were discussed. However, I was pleased to find that while my mother and the other delegates had to attend such meetings, I was free to explore the programs offered, where I had the opportunity to learn about the history and new directions of our faith, as well as many of the social action programs Unitarian Universalists are standing behind. While many talks were negative or disparaging of our decreasing membership and lack of historical roots and traditions, I was overwhelmed by a sea of hope and joy in the people that were in attendance. It was reaffirming to see so many people from all around the country who, for the most part, shared my mindset and hunger for spiritual exploration and compassion. I felt that I belonged, and I felt so much less alone. But best of all, I felt love. The most powerful experience I had at General Assembly was my participation in the March for Standing on the Side of Love. Standing on the Side of Love is an initiative backed by the Unitarian Universalist Association to stop oppression, be that through protesting anti-homosexual legislation, as was in the case in Charlotte, North Carolina, during our General Assembly, or raising awareness of the situation of legal and non-legal immigrants, with an epicenter in Phoenix, where much attention was set in anticipation of next year's assembly. The name was born of a rallying cry of UUs scarred from the acts of violence against the LGBT members of our faith. They chose to respond with an outpouring of love, not anger, not hatred. This was my first march, and I'm glad I had the opportunity to stand behind something I believe in so ardently. By standing on the side of love, we chose to align ourselves with compassion for other human beings. I did not have to believe that God was guiding me or that we were righteous. We were following goodness and standing by the people we love who are bombarded by blind hatred. Those few brave people who chose not to lash back at their oppressors who made victims out of their community with anger and violence understood that love has more power than anything, whether to heal or to advance a cause. While discovering the extent that violence has saturated the LGBT and immigrant communities, it was beautiful and moving to be surrounded by the love and light of my fellow Unitarian Universalists, choosing to march and act with love. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Lee's father, Riley Stevens, and we decided after a little bit of looking at the youth program that we go look at some of the history and social justice and theology. So I thought I'd talk to you about the future of the faith, which was a 3-hour program. The Unitarians and Universalists had a real long history of social action before the merger, and that's continued most notably with the civil rights movements in the 60s and then from there on. Despite that history, UU is losing ground to the more orthodox and fundamental and proselytizing religions of the world. So how does UU convey itself to future generations as a viable religion? Well, we don't sell certainty, and we don't sell creed, we don't sell dogma. How can we convey our liberal ideas and our diffuse, individualized religious concepts? This is my first GA meeting too, and like everyone else, I came back with something to chew on. And I'm going to take one small part, very small part, of Galen Gingrich's lecture on the future of the faith. Specifically, how his concept of God fits within a UU framework. I'm at best an agnostic, and most people who try to witness to me consider me an atheist, so it was kind of surprising that I found that interesting. Galen Gingrich is the minister of the All Souls Church in New York City, and he sees worship as a contemplation of the mysteries of God. And I was almost asleep when he started describing that definition of God, but he's looking at what's forever and what's ephemeral. If we think about what's permanent, we usually think about rocks and concrete. And yet the reality is that those objects are fleeting, and they eventually return to rubble. The atoms don't disappear. They remain forever in some form, and we have a name for that. We call that collection of atoms the universe. Everybody kind of agrees with that. And similarly, when our very finite lives end, our existence and our ideas and our relationships don't just disappear. There's a domain for all of that human experience, and if we gave a name to those collected experiences and relationships, We could call it God. God is our sense that all of our experiences matter. God's also our name for the future possibilities and the concept that the future is possible at all. It's faith. Now, we tend to be free thinkers and consider that we have some choice in the world. And Gingrich says that choice enters that picture through us. We're the human form of the divine, the face of God, the hands of God. God isn't a puppet master, and God depends on us to act. God's not a being, but exists as a concept. Whoa, he's quick. That ties the future and the past and becomes our sense of right. And this idea doesn't require us to believe in something miraculous about God. It does require us to believe in something miraculous about us. We bear the burden of the past, and we're the hope of the future. We create the God that we can believe in. UUs don't do dogma, and we can't stand creed, but a big part of our UU religion is a commitment to building a more just society. For UU and the UUFC to remain significant and grow as a liberal religion in America, the religion and our congregation and each member will have to bring action in support of our religious convictions. We need to become the face and the hands of God. 3 hours won't fit in that 2 minutes, but I'm going to try to see his presentation, not mine, and it'll be in the library someday when I figure out how to do it, and I really would encourage you to listen to it.
Good morning. I'm Cindy Lee, and the wife of Riley, the mother of Lee. So you see there's a pattern here. And it was also my first General Assembly. So it was a wonderful experience. And I chose to go to sessions that related to shared ministry, which is we here at UUFC strive to do that. The session on how to establish a lay pastoral care system was very inspiring for me. The First UU Church of Richmond, Virginia presented how they put together their program. The program consists of 2 parts, sort of a first responders team that is the casserole brigade that appear when there's an emergency. And then there's the second part, which is the lay pastoral care team, which is more long-term type response. And both teams start out with a full weekend of training, and then the lay pastoral care members have 1 year of experience before being formally commissioned by the whole congregation. Each member of that lay pastoral care team commits to 7 hours a month, and 2 to 3 hours of that is actually spent in training. For example, the Alzheimer's Association came and gave training about the spiritual needs of people with dementia. So all kinds of training in that aspect. And the minister's heavily involved in the whole process. The Reverend Jean Popke said, "It's important for the minister to make regular contact with everyone being cared for. Otherwise, the person might think they are dying if the minister suddenly shows up." So the interesting thing about this is that the identities of the congregants that were in the pastoral care was kept confidential. Only the person providing that care and the minister knew the identities. About half of those requesting the care are there either due to chronic disease or terminal disease or a long-term injury, and the other half is simply because they're isolated, either due to mental illness or dementia, or they simply can't drive to be there on Sunday anymore. So the members of that team spoke of their very moving experiences. One spoke of a woman who'd lost her cherished husband, who simply cried throughout their first meeting. But eventually, after a few meetings, she began to envision the next phase of her life and what she could do. Others spoke of sharing hymns with stroke victims or simply listening to a recording of a recent sermon together. One team member said that the training taught her how to do deep listening, that it's important not to take up bandwidth with your own concerns. I was inspired by this session and believe that we can create a similar ministry here. A couple of the sessions on governance were also inspiring, believe it or not. One that I went to, Jenny Corder who's the UUA moderator, led, and she has a great sense of humor, and we spent most of the time just chuckling about governance, okay? But she also imparted a lot of wisdom in that. And one pearl was that participating in governance is one of the key ministry efforts of the lay members of the community, which I have to say caught me by surprise. You mean going to board meetings is part of ministry? But Jenny made a convincing argument, and I felt comforted by that perspective. Another nugget was that we need to build the skills to be in community. For example, she asked how many congregations require training in how to be in covenant or nonviolent communication before someone can sign the membership book. We are people of a promise, not of a creed. Jenny also said that transparency is a wonderful policy for a board to have, but empowerment and input are much more important to community health than transparency. And there was much more that I'm not going to go into now, some other time maybe. But I felt very inspired to bring some of these ideas to life at UUFC. I learned much more than this. I was struck by the enthusiasm I heard for our faith and the wide open horizons we have before us for the future. I came away reinvigorated for another year of governance with you all.
I got the hat. My name's Kathy Crain. I was a volunteer for the General Assembly in Charlotte last month. I did it because most adventures that I take, I do on the cheap, don't I? While in Charlotte, I stayed at a campground and I took the train into the convention center. The General Assembly is definitely a reputable convention with a price tag to match. Registration discounts are given to ministers. Scholarships are available as needed and requested. Giving 24 hours of volunteer time to the UUA allowed me free access to the General Assembly for 5 days. If you're interested in doing this, just search the UUA webpage a couple of months in advance and complete the application of interest. I was given this t-shirt when I arrived at General Assembly. Explicit instructions were given to wear this t-shirt only during my volunteer shifts. So my co-volunteers and I would change repeatedly during breaks when we would venture out into the convention center. I was assigned to work the registration desk to help distribute the materials to the 3,500 folks who had pre-registered and to point to the room where on-site registration could happen across the hall for the other 500 attendees who came. At 1 o'clock on that Wednesday when General Assembly began, my co-workers and I looked at the eager crowd of hundreds in a coiled line waiting for us to begin distribution. Getting the required badge, which is this, and giving the required instructions so that they would know how to get these ribbons to each participant was organized chaos that afternoon. And my coworkers and I became very familiar with each other's armpits and elbows as we shared the filing system. I felt like I was the UUA during this time. My volunteers and I were told that the first interaction with General Assembly for most attendees would be with us, kind of similar to what you were saying, Linda. I was the UUA. I had a UUA groupie experience as I thought that the pretty blonde woman who requested her registration materials from me was the infamous Karen Armstrong, even though she told me that her name was Karen Anderson. And since Cindy and Lee were right there at that time, I gave them my impression as well, and they shared their enthusiasm for Miss Armstrong's books with Miss Anderson. 2 days later, Cindy told me of my error. But Miss Armstrong is an esteemed UU minister and gave a very, very good sermon to us Sunday morning where she referred to Karen Armstrong's Ware lecture the previous evening. She complimented Miss Armstrong well. I also had a kiss on the cheek from an appreciative lead musician as he pulled me across the registration desk after I helped him to find an important lost black notebook. It was hard to not remember that when I watched him conduct a stunning performance of music during the service of the living tradition. I am the UUA. I made new friends with my co-volunteers. One was from Knoxville, Tennessee, fellowship, and shared how her fellowship has strengthened since the shooting that infamous Sunday morning 3 years ago this month. My co-volunteers and I would reflect on programs that we were able to attend. We discussed our fellowships, our programs, and we were all invited to a lovely and intimate volunteer appreciation party in the UUA planning suite of a close-by hotel. I am the UUA. Ralph Waldo Emerson wrote, "It is one of the beautiful compensations of this life that no one can sincerely try to help another without helping himself or herself." I volunteered to meet a budget, and what I received for my free attendance was priceless. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Carol Ward, and I've had the great pleasure of working with Kathy Crain, as she'll be mentioned in this presentation about the welcoming congregation today. The welcoming congregation, I'm going to use quotation marks, doesn't mean that people are friendly and helpful to everyone, saying hi, hello, how are you? We hope that you're that way all the time, but we are more than that. The welcoming congregation is actually the name earned by UUFC after our completion of a year of intense monthly meetings, movies, programs, speakers. Our congregation voted to apply for and accept that designation in September 2005 under the leadership of our former minister, Cynthia Prescott. Kathy Crain and I helped to schedule and hold those meetings for UUFC and the whole community. We were the first official Unitarian Universalist congregation in South Carolina to get this title. But now we gladly share this rating with other congregations, UU congregations in Charleston, Columbia, Greenville, and Spartanburg. Our state can be proud that there are at least 5 religious homes for the inclusion of gays, lesbians, bisexuals, and transgender people. That is what it means to be a welcoming congregation. It wasn't an easy designation to earn, and I discovered at General Assembly that we probably need to do some refresher courses on the welcoming congregation, at least every 5 years. So we are at that mark now. To introduce our members and visitors to these policies, and to remind the long-term members about how important it is to keep these credentials up to date. When we were at the General Assembly in Charlotte, we celebrated the actions of the state of New York that voted to proclaim New York Marriage Equality Vote. The Unitarian Universalist Association President Peter Morales said, "I enthusiastically applaud the actions of the New York legislature and the leadership of Governor Andrew Cuomo in establishing marriage equality in that state. With this decision, our country takes another step on the long journey toward justice for all. Unitarian Universalists are committed to standing on the side of love until the freedom to marry is the right of all Americans." I also happen to get a bumper sticker. Marriage is a civil right. Unitarian Universalists, the uncommon denomination. I agree. It's about time for UUFC to reestablish our credentials as a welcoming congregation. Alex Holt has agreed to help us with this procedure, but even the UUA hasn't a full curriculum for this program yet. We will need to work with the Unitarian Universalist Association, their Office of Bisexual, Gay, Lesbian, and Transgender Concerns, to renew our qualifications. I personally welcome that challenge, and I hope that I can find some allies from this congregation to help in this process in the future. Thank you.
Group that I would take the more boring part. I'm Sandra Sanderson, and this was my 6th General Assembly, although I have not attended any in many a year. A lot of things in Charlotte were just as I expected based on my previous GAs. I looked forward to events such as the banner parade at the opening session, the Ware lecture by Karen Armstrong, and the service of the living tradition. That service is always a high point as we honor our clergy, those freshly minted by seminaries, those receiving their official status as fully fellowshipped, the retirees, and lastly, those who have died during the previous year. Singing rank by rank with 3,000 to 4,000 other voices as the ministers process is a real high for me. I also enjoyed seeing folks who I hadn't crossed paths with in many years, basically since the time I served on the TJ District Extension Committee. I was constantly amazed at how much they had aged. Go figure. It was a real kick also to share the experience with so many friends from my own congregation. And I had a grand time being with Johnny and Les Grady, who left this fellowship a year ago and who are now members of the Harrisonburg, Virginia congregation. And it turned out it was their first GA. I was the old lady. I was UUFC's 3rd delegate among the newbies, Cindy and Carol. We all did our duty, attending all of the plenary sessions. I believe they told us it was 15 hours over the course of the whole GA. We heard all the reports. You'll be pleased to know that UUA finances are better this year than last and the year before. And the service committee is extremely proud of the social justice work they performed on our behalf. And we learned that future UU ministerial students will be spending time abroad to do social justice work while gaining a wider perspective that they can bring to their ministries. We listened to a lot of comments and debate over bylaws changes. This is the power that we wielded. I am here to report that the GA delegates voted overwhelmingly to accept the name change of our district from the Thomas Jefferson District to our newly, more politically correct name, Southeast District. Slightly more contentious was the debate over plans to overhaul the makeup of our unwieldy 26-member UUA Board of Trustees to a slimmed-down board of just 14 members. The proposal, endorsed by the current trustee board, called for a complete dismantling of a system of representation by 19 geographical district trustees. That's how we've been doing it. Instead, the new board will be composed entirely of at-large trustees. The nominating committee will be developing a slate of candidates with inclusivity and diversity as their watchwords. And while there were a couple more bylaws amendments adopted with very little fanfare, the last bylaws amendment brought many individuals to the pro and con microphones. In the end, the Assembly voted to suspend actions of immediate witness at next year's General Assembly in keeping with efforts to minimize the business sessions, those plenaries, and free up the attendees to participate in the special programming associated with a one-of-a-kind Justice GA in Phoenix next year. On Friday, in one of the sessions, we adopted a statement of conscience that has been in the works, development, even back here in our fellowship, we were part of this, entitled Ethical Eating, Food, and Environmental Justice. Lastly, we adopted 3 of the 4 actions of immediate witness, which delegates passionate about social justice issues crafted on site in Charlotte at what are called mini assembly meetings. In addition to this, I attended numerous workshops concentrating on stewardship. I'm working with the stewardship committee this year, mission, and finance topics. Ask me about the UUA endowment. General assemblies, along with district events and cluster events, are wonderful opportunities to have one's UU horizons expanded. We here in Clemson are not alone. Like all the others who have spoken this morning, I came home from Charlotte with my batteries recharged to the exciting year ahead of us here in Clemson. One last piece of unsolicited advice. When out of town on a Sunday, make the effort to attend another UU congregation. I've always found it a joy to experience another congregation. Thank you.
If the doctor is right, 3 more days with this apparatus. I think of General Assembly as summer camp for grown-ups. It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and I have been fortunate to have had that opportunity 3 times. Each time has had an event with a special meaning for me. In 1984, at Ohio State University, I was a delegate representing UU of Las Vegas as their newly elected president. This special opportunity was singing in the choir. In 2002 in Quebec, I was a delegate representing UUFC. The most meaningful occurrence for me was carrying our banner. But before the banner parade got underway, a man had a heart attack, and a minister began singing Spirit of Life, which we all sang for between 30 minutes to an hour until EMS got him stabilized and transported. He lived to go home to Colorado. At this 2011 GA in Charlotte, the most memorable event was the first time ever service at GA honoring those who serve in the military. Several UU military chaplains spoke along with Reverend Sinkford, who has a son in the military, and Reverend Jan Christian, who wrote Leave No Brother Behind, a sister's war memoir about her brother who died in Vietnam. And I have that book right here behind me. The basic meaning throughout this service was that while we may not approve of war, we honor those who serve in our armed forces. However, it was all a very special time for me. I attended many workshops and especially loved the services with all 4,000 plus of us with 4 big screens so that no matter where I sat, I could see everything that was going on the stage and even on the floor. Music is always a highlight for me. Amazing musicians played piano, organ, strings, and horns. Imagine the joy of singing with over 4,000 Unitarian Universalists. Now is the time in our service when we share our joys and sorrows.